Hello, everybody. This is Ray Williams from IMSTA. Thank you very much for tuning in here at NAMM. Today, we're going to feature somebody who I count as a good acquaintance, a friend of mine from a long time, Mr. Harvey Mason Jr., who's now the interim president and CEO of the Recording Academy. And we're very fortunate to have him take time out of his busy schedule to sit here and just do an interview and talk about his career in music, in movies, and even in sports. So Harvey, how you doing, man?
Ray, I'm good. Thank you for having me. This is great. It's good to connect. It's been a minute, but as you said, we've been great friends over the years and a lot of intersection between our careers and where you've been and what I've been doing. And you've always been really cool to me. So happy to be here. Happy to chat with you. Hopefully I'm not too boring. You know, it's like, what can I say? I've done a lot of random and weird things. So let's go.
Let's go. You are interim president and CEO of the Recording Academy.
Well, first I was supposed to be interim CEO, president of the Academy for a few months. Now it's turned into darn near a few years, but yeah.
What is going on and what is that like? And what does that mean for you on a day-to-day basis?
It means nonstop Academy business every day, 7 days a week, really 12 hours a day. But honestly, it's been, I think, the right time for me to be in this position because it's been such a different environment and such a unique time in the history of our industry and perhaps the Academy. I ran for chair, which is an elected position. I've been on the board of trustees and I've been a member of the Academy for a long time. And I ran for chair because I saw the value of the Academy. I saw how important it was. I saw the great things that they do. Forget the Grammys. I mean, the show and the trophies, and that's amazing because we honor great music, but set that aside for now. I saw the work that it was doing around education and preservation of music and advocating for the music rights and the rights holders for intellectual property, how to monetize our art and continue to make a living. I saw what we were doing through Music Cares, giving back to the industry. And I saw all that as a trustee, but I thought perhaps there was a chance to do it differently or better and continue to evolve the Academy, and felt like there was room for improvement and growth. So I ran for chair. The trustees elected me, which was very honored to have been elected to that position. And they elected me asking me for change and asking me to look at everything the Academy was doing. And that was the platform I ran on. So to answer your question, when I was instituted as president CEO, I kind of took that same approach. I wanted to make sure that we looked at the Academy with fresh eyes and with new energy and tried to innovate and transform as much as I could. So my day consists of a lot of meetings, Zoom, obviously, a lot of learning and listening. I spend time talking to the staff at the Academy, our members, other people in the industry, and I really try and figure out where the Academy sits or needs to position itself to be most effective and use the programs that we have established and the infrastructure that we have for the most possible good for music people, creators, and the industry at large.
Well, that's great. That sounds like a lot. You're still doing all those other things, right? What are the plans for the Grammys this year? Do you have anything lined up right now or concrete plans?
The date for the show is March 14th. It was originally scheduled to be January 31st, but with everything that was happening with the pandemic and kind of the uptick in deaths and diagnoses of the virus, and we started seeing a real problem here in Los Angeles, specifically around ICU beds, hospital overcrowding, overtaxing of the essential workers. And we did not want to contribute to that. We didn't feel it was right to put any of our workers or artists at risk. So we did postpone until March 14th. As far as the show is concerned, it is going to be here in LA. There will not be an audience, as you can imagine. There will be amazing performances, I think, at the Grammy standard, if not maybe something that you haven't seen before, which is something I'm really excited about. There'll be obviously the awards, great hosts, great guests. I'm really looking forward to using the show as a time to start bringing people together. And that was our hope with January 31st. We thought it'd be a good time. We'd be past the inauguration. We would be in the new year. But as I said, it just wasn't safe. So March 14th, we're looking forward to unifying and cautiously celebrating the music from the last year.
Wow, that's a great date because that happens to be my birthday, man.
Hey, there we go. All right. Well, you can celebrate your birthday and some great music all on the same day. It's good to be 39, right?
Yeah, of course, just not 40 yet. Um, you're a music guy. That's how I know you, but you have all these other areas. But let's talk a little bit about music. You grew up around music. Your dad was a famous drummer, legendary jazz drummer. What's your name? Harvey Mason. I believe he's Harvey Mason Sr. now, right?
He is senior. He's the original. I'm the remix.
And your mom was also into music.
She was a trombone player, and my mom and my dad met at the New England Conservatory of Music, where they both went to college, and somehow got together and had me. Not sure that was a planned event or not, but so I grew up in a very musical household. My mom and dad moved to LA when I was about 1 year old, and they both started working in the studios. My mom was a trombone player, if you can believe that. She was working, doing sessions and stuff, and then ended up retiring to be an amazing mom. And my dad continued on.
Obviously, the impact of your parents. So you had music equipment around the house. You grew up around music. You're seeing. What was that like as a child?
To me, it was just very normal and natural. I didn't know anything other than that. We always had music playing. We had instruments in my house at all times. I remember my dad bringing home a drum machine at one point, which I'd never seen. No one had ever seen it before. It was like this box, and you push the buttons, and drum sounds come out of it. So it was a great environment for me to grow up in because I was just exposed to so much creativity and music. And then also being that my dad was working at such a high level with so many really talented artists and other musicians, I grew up with the bar set extremely high for what I was expected to accomplish if I wanted to enter music, because everybody that was coming to my living room for barbecues in the backyard and hanging out at my house were like top drawer people, musicians and producers and artists and label people. So I just kind of got accustomed to seeing Quincy Jones, drive up to the house, or seeing an amazing musician sit down at our piano and play a song in our living room. So it just kind of, it was ingrained in my head. I was just domesticated with that type of musical surrounding at all times. So when I started making music, to me, it was just like, oh, this is what you do. You try and make something that's amazing, something excellent, something special. And very fortunate to grow up in that environment.
And what instrument did you play at that time?
I started playing drums and piano. Those are the two instruments I started at a very early age. I think I was playing piano from the time I was like 3 or 4, really, and doing note matching with my dad. And he would sing melodies, and I'd try and plunk it out on the piano. I had a drum set at our house that I started playing also, probably 4 or 5 years old. Took piano lessons, took drum lessons, and then decided I probably didn't want to play drums and follow my father's gigantic footsteps, and then gravitated more towards piano, and had a piano teacher that was pretty rough, and she was aggressive, and she would yell and practice, and very classical leaning training. So I did that for probably 6 or 7 years, and then just kind of rebelled and said, I don't want to take piano lessons anymore. My mom and dad, I don't want to do it. So they, as much as they didn't want to, they relented, and I stopped taking lessons after I think I ultimately had 6 or 7 years of piano. And then I just started writing and creating, because with the piano teacher, she was always instructing me on the technical side and the finger positions and the scales and the theory, and I wanted to create. And so when I finished my piano lessons, I just started writing songs at a very early age. I was probably 9 or 10 years old when I started writing my first songs.
I'm very similar to you in upbringing. I mean, I started playing piano when I was 5. My parents, had equipment around the house. My dad used to play music, not at your dad's level, but I started writing songs as well around that time. And I'm wondering, When you start writing, and even back in those days, I'm always curious about this. What do you start with? You start with chords, melody, words? How does it happen? Or is it random, or is it always the same kind of way?
I think when I was younger, I started with music, chords, and sitting at the piano and just hearing things, feeling things, and letting it come out through my fingers. But then as I grew up and I started having more life experiences and I had things that I wanted to talk about, and I'd wake up with an idea in my mind or a lyric or a melody or just a concept for a song. You know, usually you're fighting with somebody and you want to talk about that, or you're breaking up with somebody and you want to talk about that, or you're healing, or you're in love. And so there's just different experiences that would start to generate ideas. And I always kept a little tape recorder by my bed and I would sing melodies, and then I'd wake up and I'd try and make a song around it. So it really has been a little bit of both. Sometimes I start a track with a drum beat. You know, you feel like if you're trying to do a certain, like an up-tempo record, there's just a drum groove that you have in your mind and it feels good, and you kind of build around that. So I've really done it every which way you can.
Then you got into synthesizers, and because you're a keyboard player, and I guess a lot of those sounds as well inspire you. Like sounds could inspire a song. Have you found that in your career?
Completely. Every time you get a new keyboard or sometimes a new workstation that had plugins that, later on you would find every time you got something new, you'd be like, oh, there's about 15 new songs in these patches right here. And so you get excited to get a new keyboard or a new bank of sound. So definitely inspired by sounds and the sonics of what comes out.
And then in your childhood, you were also into sports.
I was, yeah. I was kind of doing two things at once. I was making music and I was playing sports. I got really intense about basketball. I played football, baseball, ran track, kind of all the different things. And then I think it was 8th grade, I got cut from my basketball team. They're like, you're not good enough to play on the team here in junior high school. And that really, something snapped. And so I just started practicing and going crazy. And so by 9th grade, I'd gotten to be pretty good and ended up playing basketball for a good high school program. And then I was a high school All-American, and then went on to play in college at the University of Arizona, where we went to a Final Four and played in the NCAA tournament every year and had a really good career until I tore my ACL my senior year. And then that refocused me back towards music.
But I gotta ask, because I always wonder about this, like you're young, you're in college, all those people, I mean, what's that like, Harvey? I mean, at that age, to be playing in the Final Four, you're on television, like people are talking about you, your family are watching. What's that like for you at that age?
I think it was helpful that I saw my dad do something similar in music. I would go to his concerts and he'd have 50,000 people, or he'd be playing at the Hollywood Bowl and I'd be sitting behind his drum set backstage or something. So I witnessed him and how he handled things. So I didn't think it was that out of the ordinary. I guess I was almost expecting something like that to take place in my life. It is a thrill and it's so fun, and it's such a rush of energy when you're playing basketball in an arena. I think one of the games we played in front of 80,000 people at the Carrier Dome against Syracuse, and have that many people in the rush of noise and energy and just stuff that comes back from the audience is inspiring and exciting. Certain times it was nerve-wracking, but I think very much like music, once you get over the initial shock of how many people are watching, you get into what you're doing, whether it's playing music or playing basketball, and you start focusing on just the job that you have to do, and the other stuff is just kind of disappears, fades away.
But then, look at some of the roster. I mean, look at some of the guys you're playing with. I mean,
Yeah.
for our audience, I wonder if you can just name drop. Tell us some of these people you're playing with at that age.
Well, on my college team, everybody went into the NBA except for myself and one other person. So it was, Steve Kerr was one of my teammates, the coach of the Golden State Warriors. And, I think he's on his 11th championship now as a player and a coach, Chicago Bulls. And Sean Elliott from the San Antonio Spurs. Kenny Lofton actually was one of my roommates. He played basketball at Arizona and then ended up playing years in the major leagues. Yeah. Gold Glove Award winner. And, there's so many people, Chris Mills, Damon Stoudemire. The list kind of goes on and on. Arizona had a really long-standing tradition of great NBA players and people that came out of that school to do really well in the NBA. So I was fortunate to play with a lot of those guys, and I learned a lot from a lot of those people that I played with. And So lucky to play for Hall of Fame coach Lute Olson, and he really had a huge impact on my life in every way: my music, my career, my relationships, my family. And I think the same goes for people like Steve Kerr or Sean Elliott, because I came in as a highly touted athlete thinking I was, doing somebody important. And then I kind of started seeing a lot of other people that were at the same level I was, if not higher. And I watched a guy like Steve Kerr, who turned, what I think was probably, and he would probably tell you, less talent than I had, into something that was far superior to my career and to my output. And, everybody knows the rest of the story there. He's been one of the best shooters and best players in the NBA for a long, long time. So I saw that, and I saw guys like Sean Elliott, who were so dedicated and such great teammates. And I saw Coach Olson, who very much like my father, Coach Olson showed me a higher level of expectation for myself. And that was, like, people ask me, what did you get from playing basketball with Coach and those other players? And it was the bar of excellence went from like here to here. When I thought I was doing something at this level, I said, yeah, I'm really working hard. I'm really accomplishing great things. I'm really doing well. They would say, it's great, but we need to be here. And Coach Olson did that in everything. The way you dribbled, the way you talked, the way you dressed, the way you conducted yourself, the way you ran. It was all, the expectation was so high. And so I adopted that, and I put that in my DNA and my personality. And so I've always been thankful to people like that adjusted my outlook. And I expect more from myself. And it also kind of starts to manifest in ways when you're doing business or you're dealing with other people. You kind of start thinking, what else can we be doing? How can we be better? What can we do to raise the bar on whatever it is you're working on? And that came to be a huge asset in my songwriting career, because I was very competitive. And, you were around a lot of us during that time. And I always wanted to be better, not just better than everybody else, but better than my last song, better than the last record I produced. And it really pushed me to be creative and, hopefully to accomplish some level of success. So I still think there's a long ways to go for me personally. So we'll see.
I got to tell you, you talk about back in those days, I went to a lot of those studios in LA back and forth. And I always say that your presentation has always been like above the average, way above the average. You put a lot of effort into just the aesthetics of how your studio was. Your studio was always like, just absolutely top notch. You think you pulled a little bit of that from that basketball experience?
All of it. It all goes hand in hand. And Coach Olson used to make us tuck our shirts in, and he wouldn't allow us to walk around campus or in the airport or to games in anything less than something that represented our program. And the same went for our locker room. We'd have people checking our locker room, make sure it was clean, make sure it was maintained. And, he used to say the way you do anything is the way you do everything. And so our presentation at my studios or Underdog or even now where I am, it all reflects on the work that I do. And part of the perception is making sure that things are done in a first-class manner in everything you do. And that absolutely came from guys like Steve, who held themselves a very high standard, and my coach and my other teammates. So very lucky to have come up around that environment.
Amazing. And so you're back, you tore your ACL, you're back in music. I could say music people benefit from this. So what kind of philosophy you bring into production? What's going to be your contribution? I always like to ask this question because I always struggle with it. What sounds good? What is it that when you're producing, you're aiming for? And if you could tell us in the simplest way.
Simplest way, it's very simple explanation. I'm aiming to make something that I think sounds great. That's it. I don't try and think about what's on the radio. I don't try and think about every other source of opinion and who thinks what. I think about, do I like this? Does it sound good to me? If it does, then I've done something, I'll stop. If it doesn't sound good to me, then I have to keep working, change it, rewrite it, reproduce it until it's something I like. And that doesn't work for everybody. But I think if you catch the right timing and your ear and your taste is somewhat aligned with that of the public, then you can function that way, and you can just work for yourself, and you can work a little bit in your personal bubble, because as long as you like it and as long as that lines up with what other people are liking, you'll have a career. You'll be able to continue working. Artists will want to work with you. Labels will want to hire you. If you get to the point where what you like and what pleases your ear and your taste does not translate to the general public or to artists, then you probably need to adjust or do it a different way, be more cerebral with it and start studying what's working and really break it down and try and do some emulating. But for me, I was very fortunate because I had taken in a lot of music. It's almost like a computer hard drive or a database. I had ingested so much music over the years with my family, with my dad, and just my personal taste in music was such diverse artists from all across the spectrum. I was listening to Michael Jackson and Prince and Phil Collins and Fleetwood Mac and hip hop stuff. And so all that kind of came into the database, and combined with, as we talked about, my bar and my level of excellence, having grown around great producers and great musicians and then great athletes and great coaches. So the database of information, along with the really high bar of expectation, when I started making my own music, it was a mixture of all the things I had heard and then holding myself to a really high standard to make sure the quality was right. And again, very fortunately, my taste happened to align with that of other artists and label executives and people programming radio stations, things like that. So I was able to make music that was really exciting to me, and I would get hyped. I mean, you were around some of the sessions. We would just play music and we were in heaven. This was like a dream come true, to make music all day, all night, every day. And that was really my focus, was what do I like and what sounds exciting to me. The other thing that I have to add, though, as part of my DNA and just who I am, some people think it's good, some people think it's bad. I'm never really happy with where I am. I'm always pushing. I'm always trying to get to the next phase. I'm never content. So, people in relationships probably would hate that, and I'm probably hard to deal with. But in a studio or in a business, it's, I think, a positive, because you're always trying to get to that next phase, that next level. So with my music, kind of to answer your question, I was trying to do what pleased me, but what pleased me was never doing the same thing. It was never just resting on my laurels and status quoing the way I made music. It was about, okay, I did that. Now what's going to please me is figuring out something new, something that somebody hasn't done yet, something that sounds unique. So it was that kind of constant challenge of, how do I get to the next level, but how do I do it that's pleasing to me?
Right. And if you could take us back a little bit, I'm curious, what are some of your favorite go-to pieces of gear? I'm a gear fan, a gear fiend. So what were some of the rocks of your production back in them days?
Back in the day, the rocks of my production, it's gone through like really 4 incarnations. I think in the beginning, I was using a Kurzweil K2000, an Atari 1040 computer on Cubase.
All right.
And that was kind of my initial platform. The Kurzweil could sample. You could do like, I think 6 or 7 or 8 seconds of sampling, and then you could program it on the Cubase, and you could kind of start making cool things. So that was kind of early on. And then I went to the MPC 60, and then we ultimately got MPC 3000. So the MPC was a critical piece for a lot of records that I made, programming things that you could do on that, and the feel of that machine, the sampling capability was amazing. And with that, we were using a Triton or a Trilogy keyboard, and we were using the Roland JV 2080s at the time, just maxed out with cards. You just have the different drum cards or orchestral cards, things like that. So that was the next phase. And then from there, we graduated to Logic, just stacked up with tons of plugins. And that's kind of where I still sit, is around the Logic rig with all the different synths that I use inside Logic and plugins in Logic. And then kind of a consistent thing for the last, 30 years has been Pro Tools. I started on Pro Tools when it was Sound Designer. It was 2 tracks. And then I went to 8 tracks, and you had to bounce, vocals to try and get more than 8 tracks. And then I've been working with that all the way up until now. So we still use Pro Tools, and then I use Logic. So, and I haven't even gone back into the beginning. When I first started programming, I was using a DX7 and CV gate system with the Oberheim OBX and DMX. So that's way back in the day, but that dates me. So,
oh my Lord. I mean, I still have a lot of my gear from that time. I still have a bunch of racks and stuff that you just can't let it go. It was these are formative times. We were just like, we were so enthused. I mean, I still love that stuff, just to look at it, to pick it up, to touch it.
Yeah.
It's almost like a love story. It's all I've ever done is this stuff, you know. Again, back to production, you meet up with this guy, Rodney Jerkins. How did that happen?
I was writing and producing and really hustling my songs in LA. You know, I'd finished playing basketball and I was trying to start the next leg of my journey. I was driving back and forth to LA. I was staying at friends' house. I was staying in the car sometimes. And I was basically stalking A&R executives, following them home from labels and figuring out what kind of cars they had and leaving cassettes under their windshield wipers and things crazy like that. And a few people had heard my songs. One of the songs that I had written somehow got in the hands of Atlantic Records, probably got in the hands because I threw it at them in a red light or something. But that A&R person contacted Rodney, who was executive producing Brandy's record at the time. And then Rodney called me. I remember I was at a studio working on a new song, and I wasn't, you know, making money or placing a ton of records. I was just kind of getting my feet under me. And Rodney called me and said, I heard the song you wrote. We want to cut it for Brandy. And I was like, yes, this is incredible. And I obviously was already aware of Rodney. He was doing really, really cool things production wise, pretty quick in his career. And I was lucky because I was brave enough to tell Rodney that I'm very excited, but you know, I have to produce the song. Because originally he just wanted the song. I was like, oh, thank you so much, but I'm really, you know, I'm trying to build my career here. So happy to have you have the song, but I have to produce it. And Rodney says, well, I'm producing the record. And I said, okay, well, you know, sorry that it didn't work out. And he said, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we produce it together? And I said, great, perfect. And so we produced the first song together for Brandy's record. My song was called Truthfully, and he was producing all the other songs on the record. So once we got together to do Truthfully, Rodney and I just hit it off. You know, I really loved what he did. I really respected his production and the way he made music. And I think something about me resonated with him. He liked, I guess, the song, obviously. And then he also liked that I had Pro Tools and I had the system of recording and producing that he had not stumbled into yet. And he was still flying vocals on 3348s and things like that. So I was experimenting with Pro Tools at that point, and people weren't really making records with Pro Tools in that period. So he and I got along really well, production-wise and personally for that matter. And so he said, hey, I'm doing the whole record. Why don't you work with me on the rest of the Brandy record? And I said, of course. And then from there, we started on, I think, Whitney Houston's next record. Then we did Destiny's Child's next record. And then we just kind of went on a string. And I ended up working with Rodney for 2 years straight, you know, much to the dismay of my wife at the time. And so we were flying around the world and doing sessions. And we were literally 363 days a year doing writing sessions, recording sessions at every studio around the world.
Okay, so we got to talk about some of these records. I mean, some of these are classic, like Say My Name. You're on all these records you're working on. Now, we have a mutual friend, right, Mishka?
Yeah.
And I remember him telling me that you were like some kind of deep guru Pro Tools. I mean, you just got into the gear as well as getting into music. How important it is for, again, people watching this to really learn your gear.
It is the most important because then you're not beholden to somebody else to create your art. You know, if you really want to be a songwriter, you need to know how to get your songs from here out to the speakers and give them the best chance of being heard and give them the best representation you can. And that's what I was approaching it like. I was a songwriter, I was a producer. I did anything I could to upgrade the way my music sounded so that when people heard it, they're like, oh, I can imagine this on the radio, or I can definitely hear this on my artist. So knowing the gear, knowing how to make it work for you, knowing how to get stuff to sound right was critical. It was a lot harder back then. Now it's a lot easier. There's plugins, there's drag and drop. There's 100 ways you can make a song in a half an hour. Back then it was really studying and figuring out what the heck does a compressor even do and how do I get my hands on one. So learning Pro Tools for me was invaluable because I could record my own songs. I could edit my own songs. I wasn't a good singer, so I could edit my own vocals, which led me to becoming quicker in auto tuning and other things like that. So as it's almost a function of what you have to learn how to do to become competitive. And a lot of that was Pro Tools. And that was definitely a competitive edge for me. I think it was one of the things that Rodney liked about working with me, is because that was a powerful weapon. And when we started using it, we were doing things that we couldn't do before that. So I saw gear and the tech side of things as a competitive advantage for me personally. And I leveraged it. You know, that was really how I got to work with Rodney. It wasn't because he thought I was the best keyboard player or the most creative producer in the world. It was because I knew how to make records based around the tech that was available at the time. And I think he saw it as a potential to advance his game or to up his bar a little bit. And so he kind of co-opted what I was doing, and we worked together for those 2 years. But Pro Tools was a game changer for sure for me. And as I said, I started with it on 2 tracks. I built a system around how to use Pro Tools from a record making perspective, which no one was doing. It was a software used for, editing radio spots and for doing voiceovers and things like that. But I adapted it to be useful for record making, because that was my background. I'd grown up in the studio as a kid, watching my dad and writing songs my whole life. And I said, okay, well, this is a powerful tool, but it's not set up for music. So I kind of made a system that really, really allowed you to use Pro Tools in a productive way. And, to your point, learning your gear, making it work for you to your advantage, and using it as a competitive edge is something that I definitely subscribe to.
Great. The Destiny's Child record, Say My Name. What can you tell me about that?
It's funny. I haven't thought a lot about it until I just moved into a new studio, which is a studio that we actually originally cut that record in, which is the old Evergreen studio across the street from the Enterprise. And now I've been at the studio for almost a year, and I started thinking about being in that room recording Say My Name with Destiny's Child and a young Beyonce. And Rodney was really the mastermind of that record. I didn't have a lot to do with that, and I can't take credit for it. I did some programming and some editing and gave some creative input for sure, but he was on a tear in the way he was making that track. I remember it was originally halftime, pretty much the whole record. And somehow between him and a couple of us in the room, it got to be that fast double time thing where the sections just kick off. And to me, that's what really made that record. And I remember the moment when that happened. We're like, oh, this is crazy. Let's do this again. Let's add it again to the next chorus. Let's add it to the next chorus. And building it from what it was originally into that was something that I remember pretty clearly. I remember thinking Beyonce was incredible. That was really my first experience working with her. I'm not sure if it was for Rodney or not, but I think it was. And I remember thinking that was a potential, game-changing record. But it really started, honestly, with Angel in Disguise. Rodney produced that song for Brandy. And I think you can hear a little bit of Angel in Disguise in Say My Name. And so for me, I point more back to that record, Angel in Disguise, as kind of the tipping point for the sound that Dark Child started and that I worked on for a couple of years, because it's the programming acumen that Rodney had. And that was on the MPC 3000, by the way, doing that really fast harp arpeggiations and the hi-hat stuff before it was trap hi-hats and before it was, where we are now. We were doing that stuff on MPC, and that carried over to the Say My Name session. And we started using some of that on the Say My Name record, the really fast scratches, that stuff. And, a lot of it came from that Brandy record. But I remember the Say My Name session very well. I remember exactly where we did it. I remember how it came to be the song that it was. And it was a really cool progression to watch and be a part of.
Amazing. That's historical. And of course, I got to talk about Michael Jackson, Invincible. Did you have any role on that?
Yeah, I worked on that project for, I think, 18 months, and we recorded probably 40 songs for that project, wrote and programmed, recorded, played on. And I think a song of mine just came out a couple of years ago called Escape, which was a song that I had co-written with Rodney and the rest of the Dark Child camp. And there was one or two on the Invincible record as well that I'd worked on and programmed and done some writing on. But more than anything, I was just part of the team working with Rodney and working for Rodney to try and facilitate his vision for the record. And he had, again, I'm just such a huge fan and supporter of Rodney's as far as a creative producer and just a powerhouse music maker. So I was really in support of his vision on that project. As I said, we did probably 40 songs. There was just four of us. It was Rodney, myself, his brother, Freddie Jerkins, and then LaShawn Daniels, who was another amazingly talented and very special individual that just passed away last year. But the four of us did, I don't know, like I said, 40 songs, and then presented them to Michael. He loved them. And then we started working with him on the record and finished the bulk of the recording just before I departed Dark Child, which is in 2000. And then the record came out, I think, in 2001.
Wow, that Pro Tools skills, man, it got you very far. Amazing. And what being an expert can do. And again, really trying to get our audience is full of a lot of young up and coming music makers. And we always stress to them, learn your gear, really become an expert, learn everything, like just dig, find out. It's never been easier for them to do that with Google and all the tools we have now. So, but that's a great testament to just you or just this Pro Tools guru. And here you are, working with Michael Jackson.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also, whatever you are, be a guru at something, right? Whether it's gear or singing or writing or programming. Gear is very important because of where we are, but now it's just be great at something and try and focus your energy and your passion towards what you love doing. And I loved making music in all senses of the word. So I was able to use, as you said, gear and programming and my musicianship and other things to be able to accomplish some things and get to where I am. But when young people ask me for advice, I say, you have to find a way to be great at something. You have to be an asset to somebody at some level. And if you're just okay at something and you haven't really quite figured out what you love to do, or you don't have a passion and you haven't worked and perfected a craft, whatever that craft is, engineering, writing, programming, producing, like a craft, pick one and be awesome at it. Be a guru, as you said, at something, and make yourself so valuable to people that you have to be involved and utilize that to build your career and get to where you want to be. But I say it a lot. If you have a passion for anything other than music, and there's anything that you think maybe you might want to do as a career, you should do that. Because if there's any second guessing and your heart is not into this career and your mind and all of your energy is not going into being great in the music or the arts, you will not succeed. There are too many millions of people trying to do what we do that will die trying to accomplish their goals. They can't eat, they can't breathe without making music or making art. And those are the people we're competing against. So if you have a plan B, if you have, maybe I might be an attorney, or maybe I might, just go get a regular job, you should just save yourself a lot of energy and go do that, because we're competing against people that will do anything to accomplish their goals of making music. And so I say, make sure that you're focused, make sure you're passionate, make sure you are willing to sacrifice, and you have to be able to be smart and be studious about this. It's not just, I think I'm going to go into music. Like, doctors don't do that. Nobody just decides on a whim, I think I'm going to be a heart surgeon. It takes training, it takes studying, it takes perseverance. A lot of sacrifice goes into accomplishing anything great. So I tell people, if you want to be in this industry, and this is the toughest industry, I think, to be in. It's like the NBA. There's only so many jobs. You can be really good, but you're not going to be a professional unless you take the steps to work and perfect something and be great at something. So, long answer, sorry.
No, that's a great answer, because we try. You couldn't have said it better. We stress that a lot. I mean, that's why we do IMSTA FESTA, and we're around training hours and hours, training people how to use these plugins. The last artist I really want to get a sort of your take on was working with Whitney Houston. You'd worked with her in the Dark Child days, but you were one of the last people to work with her professionally as a producer. What was it like working with her, and what could you tell us about Whitney Houston?
I can tell you that I was very fortunate and very honored to have a long history working with her. It started, as you said, with Dark Child. It's Not Right, It's Okay. It was a song we did at Whitney's house in her studio. It took us a long time to do it. I flew back and forth to New York probably 3 or 4 times trying to get a vocal. I would show up to New York, and then I'd get a text on my little two-way back in the day, and she'd say, I'm not singing this week. And then I'd fly back home the same day. So dealing with Whitney there was a lot of highs and lows. Actually, there was no lows. None of it's really a low, but there was a lot of moments of excitement, anticipation. And then there was some disappointment where you're like, oh, okay, it's not going to happen. And that was pretty much throughout our working together time, all the way up until the end, which the ultimate disappointment was after our final session on a Thursday. We had just done a vocal session. She came in the booth. She was excited. We were singing and dancing. She was such a fun, vibrant person. I loved her so much. She was incredible. We were excited about her performance. We were to see each other at Clive's party in 2 days. We were going to sit together, spend time together. And then to hear that Saturday morning that she had passed away, it was one of the most devastating times for me in my career, because I just thought she was such a special talent. And that's the thing, Ray, that we don't really talk a lot about is people that are that unique and that special. And I don't mean to put them on pedestals or try and say that they're different from anybody else or everybody else, because everybody has a talent and really one's not more important than the other, possibly. But I kind of don't believe that. I do think people that can move people emotionally and spiritually and just with that much passion and power in what they can accomplish are very, very special. And she was one of those people. She could open her mouth and people would cry or celebrate or feel better or heal. And I got a chance to experience that. And so when those people are having hard times, I have sympathy. I have nothing but sympathy for people, because it takes a very special person to be able to do what they do. And whether that's a Michael Jackson or others. And it's controversial because they do some really messed up stuff sometimes, and it's hard to justify or rectify one versus the other. But I do know that Whitney was a very, very special person who had a special gift. And I was thankful to be able to be around her and witness it. The first time I heard her sing and her voice came through the speakers and I'm sitting in the control room, you just close your eyes. You're like, I can't believe I hear her singing. And she's singing a song that I'm working on or that I'm involved in or that I wrote. And it can affect you on a very deep level. At least it did for me. And I've always had the utmost respect for people that could create art that impacted people on a global way. And she was somebody like that. So I was very, very lucky to have been around her as long as I was. And, we went back and forth too. We would like record something, we'd erase it, we'd start over. She'd be mad, she'd be happy. And as I said, there were ups and then less than ups in that relationship. Musically, personally, of course, we were always great, but very, very honored to have worked with her as much as I did.
Yeah, I consider her the greatest singer I ever heard. I've never heard anybody that good.
There's a story about a song. We did a record called I Look to You that I co-produced with R. Kelly, actually. And she was having a little bit of a hard time with her voice at that time. I don't know if you remember, but I think it was maybe resulting around smoking or something that was happening with her vocal cords. And she wasn't always able to perform. But when we did I Look to You, I remember very specifically my engineer and I flew to Atlanta and we went in this small studio and she started singing and her voice just opened up and this vocal came out. And Andrew Hay, my engineer, has been with me for 15 years now. We just looked at each other. We're like, oh my gosh, this is a special, special moment. We didn't know what happened or why she started singing like that. And if you listen to I Look to You, that's the vocal we recorded that first day. Anyways, we went back and recorded it multiple times, let's say 6 or 7 times, because Clive wanted it in a different key. We changed tempos. We tried a little more gruff, a little more pure, more false. We tried different things, but we ultimately ended up going back to that day that we flew to Atlanta and Whitney sang the song maybe 1 or 2 times down. And that's the vocal that's on the record. And it was, to me, magical that in the midst of all that was happening with her, personally and with her instrument, she was able to deliver that vocal in a way that it almost made you weep when you heard it the first time. At least it did me.
Amazing. So let's talk about your underdog period. How did you meet up with Damon Thomas?
He was working for Babyface at the time. I was working with Rodney at the time. And then Damon was talking to Rodney about possibly coming to work for the Dark Child camp. And it didn't work out for whatever reason. And then shortly after that, I left the Dark Child camp and Damon left Babyface's camp, and we got together and wrote a song. And the first song we wrote was a song called I Like Them Girls. That ended up being on Tyrese's record. And that kind of just started a whirlwind, experience together. We didn't have a company or a business name. And Clive cut us a check, and they were like, well, who do we make the check out to? And we're like, we don't know, the Underdogs, because we had come from other camps and we were just, the little guys. So that's how the name started. That's how I met him. It was really on a whim. We wrote the song in my garage in a rental that I was living in at the time. And that really started Underdog. And it was really built on that initial meeting and that one song. And we went on and probably worked together for about 15 years, maybe.
And it's then we start seeing you get into some motion picture stuff. Like you did that classic Dreamgirls, and you were like music for picture. So how do you make that pivot from, because a lot of us coming up, we want to work with Michael Jackson. Okay, we want to make big records that are top of the Hot 100. We don't really think so much about movies and the opportunity for music in that side. So what's happening in your head that makes you think, wait a minute, let's just try to do the movie stuff as well? Like, how did that happen?
It goes back to what we spoke about earlier, Ray. It was never being content. Yeah, we got to work with Michael Jackson and Whitney and all these cool people. And I was like, this is great, but I want that. And so I always had intentions around building a bigger company, building something that was almost ubiquitous around the music space, doing music for, games and TV and film and records and signing artists and publishing. And, we did a lot of that at that time. So it was really kind of the next step for the business. And we saw that music was becoming more and more relevant in film and TV, and people were starting to step into kind of the music space to add value to what they were doing on the film side. And so when Dreamgirls came along, for us, it was an opportunity to expand and diversify the company a little bit. And it was really part of a bigger plan that I'd always had. And it was weird, though, because we didn't know Dreamgirls was a big deal. I hadn't really seen the musical, to be honest. I didn't admit to that at the time, but I wasn't super familiar with the power of that piece and the nostalgic and the the effect that piece had on a certain community of people. So we didn't really know what the responsibility was there. But once we got into it, we realized that this could be really, really cool and really special. There was over 60 pieces of music that we produced for that film. So for me, it was like, this is what I do. I make music no different. It's just for a different medium. But again, we were so focused on trying to make hit records and chart success and break artists and things like that, that Dreamgirls was like, okay, while we're doing all these hit records, I'm going to do this movie in hopes that it pays dividends for something in the future. Let's not worry about what it is now. But it turned out happening faster than we had anticipated. And Dreamgirls was the first of, so many films that I've ended up doing, fortunately.
I know. And you were working with Jennifer Hudson. It just came to my mind right now. And I remember being at the Grammys, actually, the night after Whitney passed, and she did the opening piece to open up the Grammys in tribute.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you were there. And what were you thinking? These are two people you knew very well.
I remember it very well. I remember the whole Grammy shifted because she passed on Saturday. The Grammys were on Sunday. So
I was there.
The Grammy show was completely reworked in 40 hours. I remember just being really sad. That whole weekend was a blur for me because I was really upset. The call I got was from Clive on Saturday morning, so imagine one of your mentors, Clive Davis, calls you and tells you the artist that you're currently in the midst of working with has just died. And so we talked about the party. He's like, I'm not sure if I should have my party on Saturday night or not. And I ended up going to the party, obviously with a very heavy heart, and everybody at the party was tributing Whitney. And then the next day, Jennifer sang on the Grammys. And so I just remember being very sad. I almost was angry too, because as I spoke about earlier, I feel like we need to look out for those people and take better care of those people. So I was a little angry that, myself included, that I didn't do something to try and help Whitney, and I didn't do something that would have prevented, that. And so That was what I remember at that time. And I've tried to act in accordance with that feeling ever since. You know, when I'm around artists and when I'm around people that create and have the ability to emotionally move people, I try and be very respectful and honor them in the way that they deserve to be honored. And again, please don't let it be said that I think certain people should be on a pedestal. I personally just think that that's such a unique talent that I've always chosen to respect it as best I can. And when she passed, it really made me look at some of the other people that I work with and my relationships with those people. Sometimes it's worked and it's been helpful to those artists, and I feel really good about my relationship. Sometimes it's hurt my relationship with artists because I have approached people and I've said to them, and I've almost broken the wall that's you're not supposed to penetrate. And I've said to people, I said, hey, I see you're going through this. I see you doing this. I see what you're doing here. I want to help, or I want to talk. Do you need me? Can I be around, or do you want to, because the Whitney thing shook me up. It's shaking me up talking about it right now. So I've reached out to artists and I've really tried to be helpful to them because I never want to see that happen to somebody that I respect so much and that means so much to the artist community and to the industry.
Mm-hmm. And I actually was in your studio when you were working on the Get On Up project. And that must have been a real challenge. You were doing a, James Brown soundtrack for this movie. Tell me, what was that like, or what did you learn from trying to do that work?
Well, I learned that James Brown was incredible because we had all the multi-tracks, right? So we got to pull up the tapes and listen with really like precision ears to everything that he was doing vocally, how he was talking to people on tracks, like do this, play that, play. And so I learned that he was just a monster talent. But I also learned a lot of techniques that I still use as far as being able to take pre-existing music. And we did this to some extent on Dreamgirls, but taking pre-existing music that people know and love and figuring out how to upgrade it just to the point where it's respectful to the original copyright and to the original fans of that music, but also makes it somewhat relevant to audiences today and makes it so that it can be consumed in the way that people are now used to. Like if you took a James Brown song and put it in a Dolby Atmos theater untouched, it would sound horrible. As much as that, as hot as those records are, it's coming out of one speaker, maybe two speakers, and audiences are going to be like, oh, this sounds horrible. I don't like this at all. So being able to take that music, recreate it, or sometimes supplement what's there sonically and production wise so that people don't know why it sounds a little bit different. They just think it sounds better, but they're not pissed that we ruined it. And so that was one thing I learned on that show that has been very helpful, because after that, I think maybe 2 or 3 projects after that was a Straight Outta Compton film, which we had to do the same thing, which is take music from the 80s and put in a theater in the late 2000s and make audiences think that it sounded exciting and relevant, but not anger the people who love the originals. And one of the biggest challenges with that I have to point back to the Get On Up film that as you said, I learned. I was dealing with Dre on Straight Outta Compton. Dre was, he kind of threw his hands up. He said, I'm not going to be able to recreate this music. I made it in the 80s. There's no way that I'm going to want to make it now. We didn't have any of the multi-tracks on Straight Outta Compton. So I had to go through and remake those songs and then play them for Dre. And you can imagine, I'm a pretty big guy and, tall and try and keep in good shape, but Dre is like pretty imposing as a dude. So he comes in the studio and I'm playing him my versions of his records. I'm like, oh, this is bad. This is a dumb exercise that I've decided to embark on. And so I played him the songs and he actually loved it. He said, this is amazing. You took the songs and you recreated them, but you added another layer. And so answering your question, that's one of the things that I think has made a difference for me, is I've been able to walk that fine line of not ruining the classics like the James Browns or the Straight Outta Comptons, or, now we're working on the Aretha film. So not ruining the classics, but making sure that we enhance them to the point where they sound exciting and relevant and can be easily digested by today's audiences.
And then you got Harvey Mason Media around 2008. And I want to talk about the Morning Game film because I think that ties back to your love of basketball. And how did that happen? That was more of a documentary. This was a film that you produced.
Yeah, More Than a Game was a film about LeBron James and his four best friends in high school who ended up really being his family. You know, he came from a broken home, didn't have siblings. Mom wasn't around all the time. And so he ended up becoming very close with his teammates, four best teammates, and his coach. And that was really his family structure. So the film there was an overlay of basketball, but it was really a brotherhood story and an overcoming adversity story. And that resonated with me also because it did have basketball and as its underpinning. But I got to work and be involved in that film. It was brought to me in a very raw stage. And I just kind of come off doing a couple other films on the music production side. So I innocently said, well, how hard can it be to make a movie? Let's go. I'll do it. I'll produce it. I'll executive produce it. And so we took that film we actually edited it, put it together, and then I approached LeBron. You know, this was in 2007, I think, and he was in the NBA. He had played for 2 or 3 years. So he was LeBron, but he wasn't LeBron yet. And so I said, LeBron, we're going to make a movie about your life. We had the rights and we had acquired that through, some legal workings that were done when he was in high school. So he saw the footage and he got excited about it. So we partnered on it, worked together on that for about a year, in addition to a director named Chris Bellman. Took it to the film festivals and everybody loved it. And there were 4 studios that presented offers to release the film. We ended up doing a deal with Lionsgate, did a soundtrack deal with Jimmy Iovine and Interscope Records. And we had a great time, great film, great project. It continues to pop up on iTunes top 10 every year. It seems like around playoff time or when LeBron does something amazing or wins another championship or opens up another school. People get curious and they watch that film because I think that the film really highlights and shows LeBron's upbringing, why he is how he is, what made him the man that he is. So I'm very proud of that film.
And I remember that film because, I live in Toronto, and I remember that film did very well here at the Toronto Film Festival when it was debuted here.
All right.
It almost won the best documentary that year.
Yeah. Yeah, it was best documentary. It was runner-up to Slumdog Millionaire for People's Choice as well.
Yeah. Amazing. So at this point, what are you? Harvey, are you a music guy? Are you a film guy? What?
I'm both. I don't want to, pigeonhole myself. I obviously come from deep music roots, and everything I do somehow ties back to music for me, and that's really important to me. But I do want to make sure that I'm, challenging myself, continuing to grow, trying to tackle new challenges, learn. I'm definitely that guy that's always saying, I want to learn something new, every day. I want to experience something different. So I'm always going to be a music guy, but I would like to think I could be more than just a music guy. I can do other things. Doing films is very important. We're doing some TV projects.
Yeah, not to interrupt, but I want to talk about that Pitch Perfect. And I've seen you on some of the singing contest shows as well. So you're on television as well, not just docs. Tell me about some of your TV work. Tell the audience how you got some of that started and especially Pitch Perfect.
Well, yeah, TV stuff has been kind of throughout in the last 10 or so years. I started with American Idol actually, as far as on-screen stuff, and I was involved in season 1 all the way up through season 12. I don't know what season they're on now, but I did a lot of work with American Idol, and I worked on X Factor, then I worked on The Voice, and so I've kind of done that TV music world a little bit. Pitch Perfect wise, I had done Straight Outta Compton, and the team from Universal Pictures approached me about a little singing movie that they were doing because they knew how involved in singing and vocals and how that was kind of something that I really took pride in. And so it's a small budget movie. It's about a cappella groups. And I was like, a cappella groups, who's going to watch that on a movie? And I said, I'd love to do it because it's music, and it's singing, things that I love. So I worked on the first Pitch Perfect film, and people loved it and it did well. So I did Pitch Perfect 2, I did Pitch Perfect 3, and that little run was a lot of fun, getting a chance to work with some of those great cast members there. And Universal's always doing great musical pictures.
So let's switch to the Recording Academy and Music Cares. We've just gone through one of the worst pandemics that, since 1920. I remember Music Cares had done some stuff, and how has the COVID pandemic affected your organization? Like I'm talking just just your organization, what you do, your outreach, some of the impact that you've taken on?
Very similar to how it's affected everybody. It's affected the Academy. You know, we're obviously not working from the office. We're doing everything over Zoom. Doesn't give us the opportunity to get together and do some of the events that we traditionally have. It affected our show, as we discussed earlier. It's really affected us in every way, but unique to other businesses, music industry has been hit extra hard. You know, we were some of the first people to lose income because the discretionary time spent going to a concert or to a show or to a bar or performance, that's one of the first things that people stop doing, gatherings, you know, large people or entertainment events. So music people were out of work instantly. And I think ultimately, unfortunately, there'll be some of the last people to come back because, you know, it's not, people aren't seeing that as something that we have to open up right away, a concert venue or a nightclub or a bar. So it's really affected our community. So the Academy, as you know, Ray, we're a membership organization. We are of service to our members. We have over 20,000 members who are music professionals. So every day, our job at the Academy is to figure out how to make their lives better and easier. And during the COVID times, that's been a real challenge. So, and you asked about Music Cares. That's something we're all very proud of at the Academy is our philanthropic arm. Music Cares gives back to the music community. And generally, in normal days, it's people who are suffering from an addiction or someone who's been in a natural disaster, a fire, and their instruments get lost, or someone, you know, struggled with some medical care and gotten an accident and needs help. And that's generally what Music Cares does. But during COVID, we really went above and beyond that because we saw the music community suffering. So we went into the community as far as the labels and streaming companies and publishing companies and PROs, and we started raising money and saying, we are going to aggregate the funds within the infrastructure we have at Music Cares, and we're going to push it back out into the industry. So far we've given almost $25 million to music professionals and people in the community who needed help. And generally that's people who just lost a job, you know, and couldn't pay rent or couldn't get groceries or needed gas to go to the hospital, things like that. And it's not, you know, the rich and famous celebrities that are in mansions and yachts. It's the people that are the day-to-day working musicians and music people, light riggers, roadies, ticket takers, you know, people that are around or in the industry that because of COVID couldn't earn a living. You know, the guy that had a tour booked on a cruise ship that just canceled, or the woman that's singing background vocals in a casino lobby somewhere, you know, canceled. So that's what Music Cares has been doing over the last 10 or 12 months. We have a lot more plans in place, continuing to raise funds. And the thing about Music Cares is every dollar that comes in, it goes right back out of that 25 million that we raised. It's not like we shave some money off the top for admin costs. Like this money comes in, goes out to the community, and it doesn't just go out to members. It goes out to anybody in the music industry who can show that they're a professional that needs help. So great work by Music Cares. I'm really pleased and proud that it's there.
We're talking to a lot of young people here that are watching this, and they look at the Recording Academy as something maybe for some other people. So I want you to maybe explain how the Academy could help a young music creator. How do they join? Where, you know, how do they get involved, and how can they benefit? And maybe you could say to them how it's benefited you.
Sure. I think being a part of the Academy is a part of a community, and it's the relationships, it's the access, it's the knowledge and information that is shared and that you can gain from being around other professionals at that level. It is hard when you're young and you're just getting started because your focus is on your grind and your hustle and like, what kind of sessions am I going to set up? How can I write? How can I pitch these songs to artists? How can I win, basically? But part of what the Academy does is the connections and the relationships can be built there. Also, there's programs across the country from our 12 chapters. We have chapters all around the country, and there's meet and greets, there's events, there's educational opportunities, and there's things that bring the community together. And to me, a big part of my success was collaboration and meetings and meeting people that along my journey could work with me. And we were at common levels. When I first started writing and producing songs, I wasn't a great singer, so I needed to find someone else to sing my songs. So I would go to concerts, I would go to events to try and meet other aspiring singers who were just trying to come up, and I would pair my production with their singing, and we would build together. And that's something the Academy does a lot of, which is pairing people up or giving exposure and opportunity for people to pair up with others at like stages in their careers so that you can build and grow and learn. So that's a huge value. The other thing, and this comes a little later in your career, is just the idea of, if you value the industry and if you value the opportunity to make a living, it's important that you do what you can to sustain it and give back and to continue it. So again, for a young person coming in, you're not going to maybe see that, but as soon as you're in the door and you realize what a challenge it is, and you realize some of the pitfalls that are there and some of the shortcomings that are built in the system around music, and wanting to change that, maybe for you, but also for the other people coming up behind you, or maybe the other people in your crew or in your camps, you can make a big difference in the direction of the industry through your involvement in the Academy. And then finally, and possibly most selfishly, which is actually, honestly, truth be told, the reason that I joined, which is I wanted to vote, and I wanted to vote in to elect the winners and the nominees for the Grammys. And I was thinking, maybe if I join, I can vote for myself and maybe I can win a Grammy or get a nomination. So, and I joke, but that's one of the most important things that we can do as members, is vote and be active. It's very much like what we saw in the presidential election. You can't hope for things to happen. You have to be involved in making them happen. So as a voting member of the Academy, you really have a hand in determining who the nominees are and who the winners are. And that seems like it might be superficial or shallow in the sense that it's just a trophy, it's just an award, we don't care about an award. But what it does is it's a precedent for our industry. It's a platform. The Grammys is a gigantic platform. Depending on who we put on that platform, who wins, who gets the opportunity to showcase, really impacts the direction of the industry. So the more people that you believe in and that you can vote for, raises their profile, raises their opportunity to have an exposure and bring attention and awareness to any particular genre of music. So if you're feeling like, oh, my genre is not represented, or my genre doesn't have the respect it deserves, membership and voting and being active can really have an impact on the direction of your music community, your particular type of artist, your particular type of songwriters, whatever it is. And I think making sure that the Academy remains diverse and inclusive is also really important. And I think anybody can see that, whether you're early in your career or later in your career. If you want the nominations to be diverse, our membership has to be diverse. And if we want our industry to be diverse, our membership has to be diverse for all the reasons I just talked about. So there's a lot of positives to being a member of the Academy. If you have concerns about the future of music, whether that's the making sure we preserve music and the history and where we're going, where we're educating the next generation of music makers. If you have concerns about that, you want to be a member. If you have concerns about how we're going to get paid in the future, you're going to want to be a member. If you're going to have concerns about the next generation of music makers, all these things are what I talk about when I talk to new members, because that's some of the most important work that the Academy does.
Amazing. In general, how do you, and this might or might not be part of what I was planning, but I was just thinking of it now. How do you feel about the whole streaming debate and discussion and remuneration, and what's your take on it?
I think streaming has been great for our industry, and I think that's probably counter to what you would expect me to say, but it's given the opportunity to expose so much music to consumers, and it's given people direct access to music. I think there's a long ways that we need to go to make it fair and equitable for creators of this art. But I think having the access to the music for the consumer has been a windfall. I think being able to make something on a Friday and post it on a Monday, direct access to your fans, is incredible. I think having the amount of content to influence creators and to be able to listen and get inspired has been incredible. I was driving to the studio today listening to some of my old favorite music from other artists from the 80s and 90s. And generally you'd be fishing around for a CD or digging around trying to find, where's that record of that group I used to listen to? Now you just think of a song, you can listen to it. And to me, that's exciting. It needs to be, it still needs to be some equitable solutions around payment and how to monetize the access that people now have. I'm hopeful that will happen. The Academy's been working really hard on the advocacy front to make sure that we're protected in that sense. Long ways to go, but in general, I'm a big fan of streaming. I'm a big fan of the people that are partners in that world. A lot of people think, well, we're mad at the streaming companies. There are some differences and some things that need to be worked out, but in general, the streaming companies have given us a really unique opportunity to share our music and our art with an even bigger group of people. And I think the future is very, very bright for the industry and as it relates to sharing of our music and creating and raising the bar to creativity and the output of music.
Anything you're working on now, Harvey, that you could share with us? Any big projects?
Oh my goodness, Ray, I'm working on so many projects. There's great Academy projects that we're doing. We just launched the Black Music Collective, which is a whole wing of the Academy that's going to represent Black music and inform the Academy around things we need to pay attention to, things we need to improve at the Academy. So that's a project I'm proud of on the Academy side. On my company side, we're producing the Aretha Franklin biopic called Respect, which comes out next year. Really, really excited about that. Jennifer Hudson's playing Aretha, and Aretha was somebody I worked with for a lot of years. She entrusted me with this story. We spent 4 or 5 years developing the idea of the script. So very proud of that. I'm doing a TV show right now called Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, which is on its second year. It's a music-based show. So we did, I think, 70 songs last season. I think this season might be almost 80 songs. So it's music intensive. So I love that. It's something that excites me. And it's on NBC. So it's like when you get a chance to have that much music on a network show, it's really, really exciting. So proud of that. There's a couple other shows that I'm doing as well and other projects that we're developing that looking forward to have come out. We just sold the musical to Disney, which was exciting, and that will be hopefully coming soon. So a lot of really cool things happening in the future of my personal company and the Academy. So very pleased at where we are.
And the final question, because we've taken, this has been a great interview, but I can't leave without you talking directly to these young, aspiring music producers, music creators, singers. What is your advice if you got them in an elevator? You're going up 20 floors. What's your speech to them?
That is a long speech. I need more than 20 floors because there's so much that I want to impart to these young people. First of all, and we spoke about it, be great. You cannot come into this industry expecting to get by just by being average. You have to be spectacular. You have to be special. You have to be invaluable. That's number one. Number two, study and listen and learn. Don't just think you know everything. And that goes a little bit in part to what I also say as a third step. Be humble and be amenable to working with people and collaborating with people and treat people the right way. Don't be so cocky and so self-assured that you think you know everything to the point where you offend everybody that's going to need to help you along your journey. Nobody's going to do this by themselves unless you win a singing contest on TV show or something like that. You're going to encounter people that you need to help you. So work hard, be great, be smart, study what's happened before, what works, what doesn't work. Be humble, be fair, and be righteous with the way you treat people and the way you interact with people, because you can either have a very short career or you can have a long career where people want to be helpful and want to be in your presence and around you and work with you and collaborate with you. The better you treat people, hopefully, the more that will benefit you in the long run. And also be thankful. Attitude of gratitude. I talk a lot about that because we're so fortunate and we're so lucky to be able to make music. We sit here and sing and dance and program and like, that's so unusual. And it's such a joy to be able to make a living doing that. So make sure that you appreciate every opportunity every day. Make sure that you're thankful for where you are, whether you're just starting out or whether you're in the middle of building or whether you've done a lot of greatness. You have to be thankful. And no matter how hard it is, keep working, keep pushing, and be great.
Thank you so much for your time, Harvey. I really, really appreciate it, man. And I say it on behalf of all the IMSTA members, executive board. Thank you for taking the time. Really, really appreciate it. And we're very excited to share this with our NAMM community next week.
Great, Ray. Thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this show. I think it's so good that you have, you care enough to give this information back into the community and share everything that you do. And you've always been super generous with your time in more ways than one. And so I thank you, and it was an honor being here with you and talking shop.
Great. All right, man. Thank you.